This presentation is on investment spending, which represents spending by firms on capital equipment, such as factories and machines. Investment spending is denoted by the letter I. It forms part of aggregate demand in the economy, and it also forms part of the spending which constitutes the national income. So it appears in both the national income equation and is part of aggregate demand. So let us look at investment spending in terms of the PPF. When firms invest in capital equipment, they expand the productive capacity of the economy, and this leads to an outward expansion of the PPF. So in terms of the PPF, investment spending causes this outward expansion in the long run. What are the factors that affect how much investment firms are willing to do? Well, in the short run, one of the major factors is interest rates. The interest rate directly affects firms' investment decisions because it affects the cost of borrowing. And we assume that much of the investment done by firms is done using borrowed money. So we can draw a graph of interest rates, little I, against investment, big I, and we can say that it's an inverse relationship. So the lower the interest rate, the higher the level of investment firms are prepared to undertake. Apart from interest rates, the Accelerator Theory says that investment spending is affected by the rate of change of consumption. And of course, there are also supply-side influences on the level of investment. For example, capital allowances. Many governments allow firms who spend money on machines, factories, etc., to deduct a percentage, to subtract a percentage of that investment spending from taxable profits, so that they end up paying less tax. This is called a capital allowance. It's a supply-side policy because it's designed to encourage investment by firms. Another interesting fact about investment spending is that it is, of course, simultaneously part of aggregate demand and aggregate supply. It's part of aggregate demand because it's a form of consumption. It's a part of aggregate supply because it increases the productive capacity. So, in terms of graphs, an increase in investment spending not only shifts the aggregate demand curve to the right, but in the long run, it also shifts the aggregate supply curve to the right. And it is about the only form of spending in the economy that has a right shift effect on both the aggregate demand curve and the aggregate supply curve. So we have examined what are the influences on investment spending, and we have also examined the effects of investment spending. The influences include interest rates and supply-side policies such as capital allowances, as well as the rate of change of consumer spending. The effects include a right shift of the aggregate demand curve and a right shift of the aggregate supply curve, which can also be shown as an outward expansion of the production possibility frontier, the PPF.